How did
A
you
lot of
do this?
crying, a lot of depression, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. So it's very complex. It's a very complex journey. It's a very fulfilling journey. It's a very emotional journey. It's a very psychologically taxing journey. So it's so many things in one.
Me again. What are you currently doing now in higher education?
I am currently working for the Department of Higher Education. And that means I'm still kind of, you know, in the education sector, trying to push the issue of quality teaching and learning through the, the work that I'm directly doing with the TVET and CET sectors. For those who might not know, the TVET is the technical and vocational education sector, and the CET is the community and education sector.
Yeah, thank you. So which one is better, university or TVET? That's the controversial thing they were talking on on the radio this morning.
Before I actually answer you, I am located in the university branch. So I am still working within higher education. And maybe to be clear for the others as well, the technical and vocational education and CET sectors are in higher education. And I would not say that one is better than the other. It really depends on what you want to do with your life, because they offer different opportunities. With the university sector, it's more the academic orientated, programs. And then with the technical, education, it's like it says, it's technical, it's, hands-on kind of programs, artisan programs that they actually offer. And with the ECT sector, it's more the adult education sector. So it's very different and serves different populations and needs for the country. So we need the different kinds of education pathways that are currently available. Yeah.
No, I agree with you because I mean life is so broad and so many industries, so we need to, I think you find what you love and you look at where you're going with your life, And it's a very interesting space. How did you, if you can take us back, how did you get interested in this? Because last I remember, I think you were pursuing psychology, and how did you get into this and the PhD? And if you can just
Yeah.
tell us that story.
So my career is quite an interesting journey. Yes, I actually completed my master's in research psychology. So that's where, I ended in terms of the psychology aspect of it. But even within psychology, I've always been interested in the concept of good teaching, quality teaching. What makes a good teacher? What makes good teaching? And that was mostly inspired by then my location as a tutor, but also, with psychology, because it's such an intricate, field, in that you need to actually have a master's degree to in different areas, obviously, to be called a psychologist and to actually practice in that. And there's so many students who go into it in terms of first year, and only a few of them kind of, end up being psychologists, one being yourself. So I've always been interested in that aspect. And the other one is the fact that I was a lecturer, at one stage in my career. And I struggled as a young academic, especially, working in a long kind of distance mode kind of situation. I always kind of reflected on myself to say, am I being a good teacher? Am I making the difference that I hope to make? And we exist in a space where social justice is very important to me. We know, for instance, that many young Black students go into higher education, and few of them actually, get out or achieve their qualifications within the minimum specified time. And of course, it's very complex. There are different issues dealing, that students have to deal with, that impact, their ability to actually, get their degrees and eventually get into the working space. So it was a deep discomfort that really prompted me to go deeper into trying to understand, you know, this concept of quality teaching. And that was my actual, you know, inspiration for my PhD, I must say. So for my PhD, I decided to look at the concept of quality teaching from a policy perspective. And at that stage, I was lucky enough to have been mentored and supervised by the late Brenda Leibovitz, who was actually the first, who held the first chair of teaching and learning at UJ. And I was, she was my supervisor, but also I was working with her in the chairship as a project manager. And in terms of the work that we were doing, professional development and obviously that linked to quality teaching was a very important aspect of it. So that's kind of where my journey and started in terms of my PhD. Yes.
I think very wonderful work. I mean, and it can't be overlooked because in South Africa, I mean, I worked then as a psychologist also at one of the universities, and I remember when when there were the marches, when the fees must fall marches were happening, and there was a whole conversation about education, quality education, decolonizing education, and I think it's like a hot potato.
It
Do
is.
you find that they, in maybe before I even go there, so when you were doing your research and your PhD in quality teaching, what did you find? How did you go about researching, and what did you find?
Yeah. So as I stated before, I was working with my then supervisor, Professor Leibovitz, who, as part of the chairship, you know, I was part of a larger NRF funded project. And this was across 8 universities, looking at different aspects of, you know, professional development, structure, culture, you know, and agency. And that's where kind of I located myself somewhat, and tried to navigate, you know, the whole issue of quality teaching and learning within that larger research, NRF funded research. I obviously could not, you know, take the entire, you know, 8 universities as part of my research, but I took the 5 universities that were representative of the kind of universities that we have in South Africa, you know, the comprehensive, the research, and so forth and so on. So in terms of my research, that's kind of where it is located within a larger NRF project. And there's actually a book that has been written on that project and published by the CHU, which is the Council on Higher Education. So if you're interested in really finding out the complexities and understanding, you know, how structure, culture, and agency plays itself out in higher education in terms of teaching and learning specifically, that is an important resource. And it's actually a national resource, and that is why it is located within the CHE, the Quality Council. So yeah, that's where kind of my PhD is located. In terms of the interesting findings that I can talk to, look, quality teaching, as you mentioned, it's such a complex phenomenon. I'm still, you know, as a newly, you know, a new kind of PhD graduate, you know, you still grappling with it in terms of the complexity of our country. You know, you're talking issues of you know, decoloniality, you know, you're talking about issues of social justice, you know, equality, access. And, you know, you cannot remove that obviously from the funding, you know, issues that we have, you know, in higher education from the national perspective, but also institutionally. And now, I mean, you can imagine the issues that universities are faced with within the COVID context, because now they, within the limited resources that they have to kind of step back and say, where can we shift resources within universities to ensure that quality teaching and learning still continues within, you know, the restrictions of, you know, the different levels that the government has put in place, within the restrictions that COVID has actually prompted us as a people, internationally, nationally, because we are unable to go on, you know, teaching and learning the way we have been doing it. So the issues of resources is always an issue that can never be looked when talking about teaching and learning. So teaching and learning is not only what happens in the classroom. What I'm trying to say is teaching and learning is not only what happens in the classroom, in the lecture hall. Teaching and learning goes beyond that, because there are aspects that impact the nature and quality of teaching and learning. So you're talking about the environment itself, the university environment, be it, you know, the physical environment, you know, the issues of big lecture halls and, you know, I mean, I think in first year, if you can remember yourself, we're like 600-700, you know, students in one place. And, you know, there's always that debate, what kind of teaching and learning happens in those spaces? And is it the only way we can engage with teaching and learning, you know, to actually ensure that we produce quality students, quality graduates that can add value to society? Of course, an integral part of it is the professional development. So I'm sure you are aware that university teachers are not necessarily trained, you know, like basic, you know, education teachers to be teachers. You know, for instance, when I became a junior lecturer, I came in from an intern as a research psychologist. So it is my discipline that enabled me to get into the space of being a junior lecturer and then growing within that space as a teacher in higher education. So the pedagogy aspect was not very familiar to myself, because I was not introduced to that in my undergraduate, even postgraduate, because I mean, in terms of my discipline, I did not have to engage with those concepts. So I think that contributed to my discomfort, because I realized I may not actually be adequately skilled to be an effective teacher and to actually make the difference that I want to make. So the issue of professionalizing university teaching is one of the key issues that nationally is on the agenda. I know the department as well as the CHE have are having conversations, and there's actually now what I can say, a project or concept paper that is aimed at encouraging universities to professionalize teaching. So at this stage, there are programs within universities that aim to professionalize university teachers, so that they are not only disciplinary experts, but they can also teach in terms of the pedagogy, because that is as important as the discipline.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I want to say you raised some important points, you know, in that I'd be interested in knowing the name of the book. And when you talk about, you know, the teaching not just being the physical space you're in, but, you know, funding, what happens around, because I know some people who are struggling with learning because they have to catch 2-3 taxis to just pitch up to a lecture hall. Then you must also leave early because your train is going to leave you afterwards. So things like that, and you know, the assumption we make about maybe you have a degree, but are you able to teach? And you're you know, referring to then how we need to professionalize. And I wonder if there would be another degree or some sort of, would it be like a workshop, or would it be, you know, in what format would that exist in?
So traditionally, you've had workshops and seminars as mechanisms for kind of developing, you know, university teachers to teach. So that's been the traditional norm. But the argument has been that it's not adequate, nor sufficient to actually develop, you know, one as a teacher, you know, who's conversant with pedagogy and is able to navigate between the pedagogy and discipline and actually be an effective teacher. So there are different programs, I must say, that have been developed over the past few years, especially prompted by such as the research that I was involved in, but also other activities that, you know, people have engaged in terms of research in the country. So we have, from certificates, postgraduate certificates, we now have actually a master's specializing in higher education. I think also PhD, if I'm not mistaken, with Stellenbosch. So there are a few universities that have kind of on a master's and PhD level, but I think with many, if not most, all universities, they have a postgraduate diploma that focuses on higher education, you know. So right now I can say we are, as a country, we are slowly strengthening our system in terms of producing programs that are aimed at strengthening pedagogy in universities. So we have moved quite a bit in the last 10, 15 years in terms of those aspects. So you have the short-term programs such as the workshops, the seminars, which serve a certain purpose, because you need to be aware of the purpose that the different programs serve. So you can't just have, for instance, a PhD or master's level when you need immediate, for instance, interventions that can be, you know, kind of resolved, or kind of resolved by short courses or workshops or seminars. So those are the different mechanisms that the university system is using to push for professionalizing of teaching and learning.
And speaking of, you know, professionalizing teaching and learning, so I mean, you went on this journey, right? Now, more personally to you, your journey with studying. How important was your relationship with your supervisor? What were your highs? What were your lows? You know, how was it? Did you cry? Did you have
A
to?
lot of crying.
How did
A
you?
lot of crying, a lot of depression, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. So it's very complex. It's a very complex journey. It's a very fulfilling journey. It's a very emotional journey. It's a very psychologically taxing journey. So it's so many things in one. So firstly, I was one of the lucky people to have a supervisor who was a teacher. She was the epitome of who and what a teacher should be in my eyes. And that led to us having a relationship that was enriching, and that led to a relationship that made my journey towards this PhD quite, you know, I can't say easy, but, you know, comforting, because she was a teacher, yet you could feel in her teaching and in her critique that it came from a place of care and love. And I know some people might think, you know, why are you bringing in mushy concepts? But being a teacher requires one to actually be aware. For instance, you were talking about students who, you know, climb taxis, you know, 3 or 4 taxis just to go to university. That requires you to understand students, where they're coming from, in terms of the social, psychosocial aspects of it. You need to understand those in your teaching, because they either create an enabling environment or a constraining environment. It's the same with my journey. So if my supervisor I did not feel the way I felt about my supervisor, it would have been a more constraining environment, me not being comfortable in, you know, for instance, communicating with her and asking questions. But because she created that enabling environment, an environment that she sees me, not just as a student, but also as a human being and where I'm from, and understood my context, that really enriched our kind of supervisor-student relationship. And I must say that she passed on in our second year, I think second year of supervising me. So my supervisor passed on when I was probably
In the
in
middle.
chapter 3 or 4, you know, chapter 3 or 4 or something. And it was very hard for me. It was extremely hard for me because of the person she was, you know, but also it's mourning the person who dies, but also mourning a supervisor. So they were like different, I was mourning different aspects of her, which was very hard. But also then the journey after that of me being allocated a new supervisor within the university system also was, interesting, but also long, complex, and hard. So it's not just the writing and rewriting and the reading that was hard. It was also the process of losing a supervisor, mourning a supervisor, but also having to be allocated a different person who, unfortunately, at that stage when she came in, I was very advanced in my studies. So I had to understand that she had to have time to understand me as a human being, understand where I was in my studies, and try to understand actually my study itself, so it was very interesting. It was very complex. It was very hard. It was very emotional. But I am very grateful for the person that they gave me to kind of complete my studies with. She also tried very hard to create an enabling environment for me. And that really led to the possibility of me actually even, completing the PhD, because it would have been even longer, if the person who came in did not quickly, create that enabling environment. And I actually have quite a good relationship with her, and hoping that even after the PhD, we can work together in different areas. So yes, my PhD was not a normal PhD journey. It was, one of those complex, sad, but enriching journey. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my late supervisor. I'm grateful for the person that was allocated to me later on. It taught me a lot, perseverance, patience as well.
And what kept you going? I mean, it's because you're describing a situation where a concoction of all sorts of emotions,
Yeah,
and you had the supervisor who really cared, who connected with you. You lose her, and that's like a low. And you have
yeah,
this new person, new supervisor who you must get to. They must get used to your study. You're talking now about um, patience and perseverance, but even in your lows and to persevere, what is it that kept you going? Was it through, is there something that you realized, something that you thought, something you prayed about? What was it that just kept you going?
it might sound cliche, but from a very young age, I've always wanted to complete a PhD, even before I knew what a PhD was. And this was mainly shaped by the fact that my grandfather was a mathematician, in the mines back then. So there was a lot of education talk when I was growing up. My aunties and uncles who I grew up with mainly were all very education orientated. So from a young age, education has been one concept that's been familiar and comforting to me. And not just comforting, but knowing that education will expand my cognitive boundaries, not be cooped up in this reality, and that reality sometimes can be depressing, but rather, expanded so that I can see other horizons, other opportunities. So what kept me going is really, and the fact that I had, this conviction that this was a God-given, goal for my life, that I needed to complete this PhD, and there was nothing that was going to keep me from doing that, no matter how many years it took me, and no matter how many challenges I had to go through. And obviously, family kept on rooting for me, and that can be such a huge, backup, especially when you're low. Just family encouragement is big. Yes, thank you.
It sounds like it was it comes from a deep place, and this is why I love talking to people about this journey, because you can hear that there was this something that was inside of them, that kept them going. And maybe three more questions, but the one is around family. How did you juggle pursuing academics? Because some of us, where we come from, you have to go to, is it the money, is it the PhD, is it the baby, is it, how did you navigate that whole journey?
Oh wow, you have to make quite a few decisions. But for me, especially working in a government sector. It's where it's very high paced, it's hectic, it's pressurized. It's not been easy, but that deep down motivation is what kind of keeps you going to say, I want to get this and I will get it regardless of what's going on around me, the pressures. To make certain decisions during your PhD. For instance, I had to put off having a second child, now I've just had my PhD baby. I call him my PhD baby, because I knew that I couldn't juggle working in a high-paced environment that I work in and juggling being a mother as well as having a newborn, but also the everyday. We play different roles with different people, family, extended family. So you don't want to overburden yourself so much that you burn out and you lose the enthusiasm of having to do your PhD and enjoying the process as well, because it's important to also enjoy the process of writing, rewriting, and questioning and reflecting. I think it's very important. It's an important aspect of the journey itself. So I had to make important decisions in order to kind of complete my PhD, and yeah, some of them are the babies. And in terms of the monetary value, look, I think everybody has to make that decision. What is important at what stage? Because yes, the money might be there now, but what then would your PhD afford you, in 5, 10, 15 years time?
That doesn't make you more.
I don't really think so. In terms of my look, I think it gives you a bit of intellectual something. I don't know what that is, but in terms of monetary value, look, you make life what it is. Hey,
Yeah.
you really, and it's about your priorities in life and where you want to grow career-wise. I think that's an important issue, where you want to grow career, where you see yourself 5, 10 years from now. Do you see yourself being a millionaire? Great, go, with the making money part. But do you want to see yourself in a certain level career-wise? But also, knowing that that career stage would afford you more monetary, compensation. So it's
Yeah.
not an easy decision. It's like,
Yeah, no, you're right. It's not an easy decision, but you use the word that people really associate with PhD. So, because you use the word enjoy, and you use the word enjoy and enjoy reading, writing, and I think that's an important thing to highlight, that, it's not just money is good, but which also, I think what helps is when we do things that we enjoy, that we can build and we can, the more PhDs we have in a certain country, what we can do with the knowledge that we have, writing, particularly for us in this context. So my second last question is that then doors been open now? You're a doctor? Do you insist that people call you doctor? Do you feel different? Do people look at you different? Does the room feel different when you walk in?
to be honest with you, for me personally, it's just an attainment of something that I've wanted to attain since I was 6 years old, like I stated before. Secondly, yeah, there's that thing of people, now you're a doctor, doctor. I actually have this, I feel uncomfortable at times now, like,
Because you must
what is it?
smart things now.
Yeah, smart things sound smart, but also what exactly is one supposed to be when you've attained the peak? It was a journey. Yes, you did what you're supposed to do. It's a title. It doesn't really change who I am. I don't think it really changes who I am. It just says I've undertaken this journey, and I know certain things, not all of it. Even within the PhD itself, I know certain aspects of it, but it's obviously, that's why you have the postgraduate, the postdoctoral, fellowships, and you're always learning. And yes, people expect, oh, doctor, now there's this assumption or perception at times that you should be afforded a certain level of respect. But for me, by virtue of being human, you should definitely be afforded a level of respect just by being human. So I prefer people not to call me doctor. if necessary. Sometimes, you know, in certain spaces, it's kind of protocol, which is fine, but I would rather be called by my name, Precious, because that's who I am, and that's who I identify with better.
That's a precious thought indeed. In, in that, you know, that's how I like that there's the humanity there, but I do like that, you know, because you do set an example, you model something. I think when people look at you, it is encouraging. It is lovely to see that, oh, you know, this girl who came from where we came from, look at her, this lady who's doing this, and you know, I think it's nice for people to see, and then they can see themselves, they can see their face. So that's an important thing. And then what do you do that you said as you were commenting? Is my last question then is, you know, what would you say to somebody who has a dream and who's struggling, who's saying, but is it too much of a sacrifice? Can I do this? And so just your last words to anybody contemplating going on this journey that you are on, or you've been on, and you know you are, you know, adding to it and then creating after that.
I think that one thing that comes to mind, and I would really encourage, especially young people, is don't be afraid to walk up to somebody who you think might assist and just say, I am this person, I am doing this. I don't know if you can assist me in this and that, because it is that proactiveness in that. And look, I'm not saying one is not going to have the anxiety and, you know, the questioning, must I not, but do it, especially in when it comes to education and higher education. It's because you do need those, you know, people to open doors for you, whether it's being a supervisor, whether it's access to funding, whether it's access to information. You as a young person need to really use that agency that you have, or sometimes maybe the little agency that you think you have, and use it as a stepping stone to that which you want to achieve. It is not easy, but believe me, there are opportunities out there. They're not going to find you sitting there. They're not going to find you hallowing in your own sorrows. You have to take that first step and say, what can I do in my current space to get to where I want to go? So use those networks. Networks can be your peers. If it's asking questions, if it's asking for resources, if it's asking for where can I go to get this and that, or to find out this and that, it's about networks, it's about networking, it's about having those communities of practice. If you're a student, for instance, you know, a master's student or PhD, having those voices, those human beings that you can bounce off ideas, it's very important. And do not let go of that dream. That is what you have, and that's what's going to keep you going. What kept me going through it all is knowing deep down that I wanted to get that PhD.
Thank you very much, because you can't get what you don't want, you know. Much appreciated. Thank you for the time, and it's just beautiful to see what you're doing. I'm glad that there are people like you know, changing the systems that you're referring to. I think creating a culture and realizing that we all have agency, and you know, we need to just build that and encourage each other. But thank you for the opportunity. All the best. We are looking out to see you doing great things. So much appreciated.
Thank you so much for the time and opportunity to share a bit of my life journey towards the PhD.